Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the ScruffyMovies podcast. I'm Zach.
And I'm John.
And today we're going to have another horror movie episode for you guys. We're going to talk about the Friday the 13th series.
Which was new for me. Again, much like many of the horror movies we've talked about on this show. I had seen the original, and I thought, again, that I could tell you everything that happened, at least in that one movie out of the, 10 that there are now? 12. But I was even wrong about that. But I did enjoy going back and watching a few of them. In preparation for this podcast, I marathoned Friday the 13th, the second one, the third one, and then skipped way in the future to see what the 2009 version looked like, just to throw in a little bit of variety. But I definitely want to go back and watch them all now. They've got me hooked.
Yeah, that's what, for all the Friday the 13th fans out there, I told him to watch the final chapter. He just didn't get a chance to.
Yeah.
It wasn't that I told him to skip the final chapter. I just want to let them know so I don't lose my horror movie cred.
Well,
because everybody out there knows that's the best one.
I think when I asked you which ones I needed to watch, like we did the week before with Halloween, you said all of them and then left me to my own devices.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's when we were having the conversation, I was like, oh, we definitely need to see 1 through 4. And I was like, well, 5's something totally different. It'd probably be cool to talk about 5. But then you got to see 6. I don't know, 7's pretty good. Well, you got to see 8. You can skip Jason Goes to Hell. Oh, dude, but you got to see Jason X and Freddy vs. Jason. So basically all of them but one.
Yeah, so I will be going back and checking them all out.
Yeah. All right, well, I know you got a few questions written down. Why don't you kick it off like always?
So the one question I have that I sort of wanted to be explained but never really got explained from the ones that I watched is, why does he always leave one girl alive? And I think with the exception of maybe at the beginning of the second one, there's always like just that one survivor, and he always has the opportunity to kill him. He always grabs them with a big jump scare at the end, and then it's like they get carted off and they live through it. I feel like that sort of happened in all the ones I watched. There was at least one survivor.
Well, yeah, that's kind of where the final girl trope came from, was like all the 80s movies and stuff, of, well, they got to have one.
Right.
At least.
Has to live to tell the story.
Right. And so, I mean, I think the Friday the 13th series has been pretty good about it. Besides the third movie, they've been pretty good about explaining all like the little scares and stuff at the end. Because even the first movie, she's like, did you get the little boy? And they're like, there was no little boy. And she's like, oh, well, then he's still out there.
Exactly.
And then so that's why Jason comes back. And then in 2, they explain it in the beginning of 3 that they got away,
Yeah.
And then, but 3, when Pamela Voorhees pops out of the water and drags that girl under, then everyone at the end was just like, she's crazy. Like, they didn't explain it anymore other than, whoopsie, she's nuts. And then they didn't really explain it past that.
That's true. And they did kind of flash away, though, with, like, Jason still being killed, right? Because he was at the barn. He was in the barn, like,
yeah,
laying there.
Well, basically, every Friday the 13th movie they thought was going to be the last.
Right.
So that's why in every movie they kill Jason. Because they're like, all right, the evil stopped. And then they were like, oh, this movie made a lot of money. Let's make another one. And they went, how are we going to bring him back now?
So, up until, let's see here. I think going into 4, which is one that I haven't seen,
it's the best one.
Really when he leaves that area, correct? So don't they like cart him off, and that's how he gets away from Crystal Lake? So since I haven't seen the rest of them, and I know he goes everywhere from Manhattan to hell and back again, how does that sort of go? How do they tell the story of him not being sort of locked to that one area?
Okay, well, he is kind of locked to that one area. Besides literally the 2 movies that you named, he's basically in Crystal Lake. But what happens in 4, the final chapter, is they really thought that was the end. Like, this was the end, done, Jason's dead. Like, they kill Jason. A dude hacks him in the face with a machete and he falls down on it, killed. Like, he's dead, done. And then so in 5, because 4 made so much money and people really loved it, they were like, oh, well, we got to do something. So it's called A New Beginning, and it's a copycat killer, Jason, who comes back and starts killing all these people for a reason that I won't spoil for you so that you won't know who the killer is. But it's a copycat killer. Nobody liked that. they were like, that's stupid, that's dumb. So the producers were like, okay, well then in the sixth one, guess what? Jason lives, and that's the name of it. So basically, there's a kid that's introduced in 4 who's in 4, 5, and 6. His name's Tommy Jarvis. He's the only person to fight Jason more than once and survive. And in 6, because of what happened to him in 5, he's like, I need to make sure Jason's really dead. I've been having all these nightmares that he's not. I need to make sure like he's really done. So he goes to the graveyard, digs up his body, which has been buried since the 4th movie, and starts stabbing him with this like stake he pulls off of the graveyard fence, and then lightning strikes it and brings him back to life. So that's where the undead Jason comes in.
And so he Frankensteins him.
Frankensteins him back to life.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Okay, so that sort of goes into another question that I had, which I usually have with these types of movies, is that do they ever say, and I asked this about Michael Myers too, is he actually just a regular human, albeit deformed, or is he some sort of a demonic spawn that has some power given by a greater force?
Well, in 1 through 4, it's basically implied that he's a human. He's just a human
that's been living in the woods, eating what he needed, stealing to survive.
He's just a person.
Right.
But in 6 is when he becomes like undead, and then the rest of the movies he's basically like an undead version of Jason. And they actually do something really cool in part 9, which is fleshed out more in a comic book series that I really love called Freddy vs. Jason vs. Ash from the Evil Dead franchise. The main character goes into the Voorhees house where Jason and his mom lived, and he finds the Necronomicon, the Book of the Dead, which is all throughout the Evil Dead movies.
Right.
So it's basically implying that his mom was doing some kind of witchy voodoo stuff, brought Jason back to life, and that's why he can't die. And then they explain that more in the Freddy vs. Jason vs. Ash series, is like, I put a curse on you. You died once. I didn't want you to die again. Now you can't die. You've got to come back.
Gotcha. And that's sort of one twist that I just totally had forgotten even existed in the first movie, is that it was actually his mom going through and killing everyone. And then you get the big, thing at the end there where he jumps out of the water. And I knew that was coming. I remember that scene. It was burned in my brain. So as soon as it showed her in the canoe, I knew exactly what was coming. But up until then, I had totally forgotten that she was the one responsible in that movie, at least, for all of the murders. And then in number 2, he has the bag on his face the whole time. And he actually doesn't even get his hockey mask until number 3.
Yep.
I believe is the first time you see that.
Gets it from Shelly.
Shelly, the fat dorky kid. So there is totally...
My wife just recently, I was playing Friday the 13th, the game, and Shelly is a character you can play in that. And she was like, he reminds me of you. And I was like, are you kidding me? I was like, are you being for real? The entire movie, he talks about how ugly and fat and stupid he is. You just insulted me without knowing you insulted me.
But we are so awesome at the nerddom that we have an entire movie podcast now. So I think we've channeled that into something productive.
I know, but it just offended me without saying that. And she was like, no, like the way he's like, oh no, and stuff like that. Like that's what you would do. And I was like, you don't know how bad you just offended me. You hurt me to my core, comparing me to Shelly.
Well, so going back, there is much more of a warm-up for this series than I thought there would be going through it. I thought, going back, that I would jump in and it would instantly be, running around, hockey mask, murdering everybody. But it's like, no. In fact, in the first movie, it's not even him. You don't see him till the very end. In the second movie, he doesn't even have his hockey mask. It really takes a while to sort of like warm everything up and get to what we now associate with Friday the 13th.
Yeah, and being a kid, I watched the Friday the 13th series very like out of order because I would see them on TV and everything. I never actually sat down. So I would watch like 7 and 8 and then like 4 and whatever, And then so actually sitting down and going back and watching the first one, I was like, oh, whoa, this is weird.
It's totally different.
It's not Jason. And then the second one, I was like, who's the dude with a bag on his head? Like it was just so, I couldn't, it took me out of it when I was a kid because that hockey mask has become so iconic and synonymous with Jason. Seeing him without it is kind of like, oh. Huh.
Yeah. It was weird. And I kind of knew it was coming because I did enough research on sort of what I was about to dive into that I sort of expected it. But even watching it play out, I was like, wow, this is a little bit different than I anticipated it being.
Yeah, that, and even in the third movie, I just recently got to see part 3 in 3D in like 35 millimeter, like the way they showed it in the 80s. I got to watch it, so that was really cool. And I hadn't seen it in a while, and just even like they make such a big deal of it in the remake that you watched of him like finding his mask, and it's like, oh, this is it, and he puts it on, and it's like, oh, that's Jason, yeah. In the third movie, he's just walking around without a mask for the whole time, and then he just kills Shelly, and he's like, and then the next time you see Jason, he's got his mask on. He's got a mask on.
Did we ever figure out what was in Shelly's luggage that he was so protective of? Was it the mask?
It was the mask and like all his little pranks he pulled. I mean, I know that whole thing, and he's like, I've got to do these things. Nobody will notice me if I don't. I was like, oh, shut up,
That's
dude.
only because of the comment your wife made.
No, but I mean, Shelly's always been that character, which is why it hurt me so bad when she said that. But I mean, and then just watching it again after my wife had compared me to him, I was like, I got to have a real serious conversation with Brittany after this.
Well, watching it not in 3D, it was very obvious when the moments came up where it was like, oh, I bet that would be awesome in 3D when something comes directly at the camera, and it just seems so weird when it's not in 3D.
Yeah. And it was actually really cool in 3D. I was thinking it wasn't going to be that good because they hadn't, I mean, like had all the technology that we do now to go to the theater and see something like Avatar, where you're just like transported into Pandora because of the 3D. It was just people picking up sticks and like, whoa!
Right.
And I was like, it's probably not going to be that cool. And then still, even like it would come out right at you, and I was like, whoa, that's pretty cool actually.
Yeah, old 3D like that was much more of objects leaving the screen and coming right up to your nose.
Yeah.
Whereas new 3D is more like you're looking into a box that has depth.
Yeah,
it's like you're looking
immersive.
into a shadow box.
Yeah.
Whereas back when Terminator was coming out and these movies were coming out, it was all just what can we zip out of the screen to give you that bit of a jump in your seat, you know?
And there's even, I feel like they almost put 3D in it after they wrote the script, because there's nothing that's overtly 3D about it. It's just little things where like people pick up stuff and poke it out at you.
Yeah, there's the yo-yo scene where it's coming down to her nose, you know.
And there's a giant chunk of the movie that has nothing popping out at you, like whatsoever. There's a gigantic chunk of that movie that like it went from one thing until we were just watching it, and then it was like the popcorn that they were cooking in the kitchen was popping up the screen, and I was like, oh yeah, this is a 3D movie. Like, they just don't do 3D for a very long time in that movie.
Well, I would have to absolutely go back and research this, but it wouldn't surprise me if that was something that just sort of came in vogue, like, right in the early 80s.
Probably.
And they really just wanted to capitalize on that, so they wrote in a few little spots here and there where they could get away with poking something out. And other than that, they just made the movie they intended on making.
Right, and it's a good movie. It's not, like, take the 3D out. It's a good Friday the 13th movie.
Probably out of the 4 that I've seen, which now, it just sounds so weak saying that. But out of the 4 that I've seen, if it's not my favorite, then the original is my favorite. But again, we've talked about this before. Like, I just love original movies. So if it wasn't the original 1980 Friday the 13th, then I would definitely give it to number 3. And I loved, like, even the van where they had her name painted, like, under the window. I just loved that part of the 80s, and they did everything right.
Yeah. That, I gotta say, the 4th movie is my favorite, which I've talked about a little bit on this one.
Right.
And that's, I mean, it's perfect 80s. Corey Feldman's in it. You know Corey Feldman from, like, The Goonies and The Lost Boys and all that stuff. He's in it. He plays Tommy Jarvis. And he plays a kid that's like obsessed with horror movies and stuff like that. So he kind of sees Jason coming. And there's like all these kids at a cabin next to them that are getting hacked up by Jason. And it's really cool the way they do it. And I mean, they kill him. And Tom Savini, who originally designed Jason in the first one, came back and he's like, I made him. If anybody's going to kill him, it's going to be me. So he came back for the 4th movie and did like all the special effects, like all the makeup of killing Jason and stuff. And I recently went to a con he was at, and he had like little mini Friday the 13th, the final chapter posters, and I got him to autograph it, and now it's framed in my movie room.
Nice. So this is your favorite, horror movie. Would you say that? Like horror movie franchise, rather? Because I know when we were talking last week about Halloween versus this versus Nightmare on Elm Street versus all the sort of the classics.
Yeah, this is definitely my favorite horror movie franchise, which is funny because Scream is my favorite horror movie. That's just one of my favorite movies in general.
As a standalone.
Right.
Yeah.
But this is definitely my favorite horror movie franchise. Like I was telling you, I have a coffee table book that's like 2,000 pages, and I don't think you're ever really supposed to read it. It's just supposed to be like, oh, wow, looks neat. Right. And I read the thing cover to cover. It took me like 2 years to read it all. And I read it cover to cover about the franchise.
And then didn't you go to like some event where they basically just rehashed all of that or something?
No, they had there was one documentary that was like an hour and 30 minutes. Bought that the day it came out. I've seen that a million times.
That's what it was.
There was a documentary that came out that was 4 hours long. Bought that. Watched it a million times. So there's literally like everything about this franchise is just cooked in my brain right now.
So as far as the timelines of the franchise go, was the 2009 version that I watched, I'm assuming that was sort of like a reboot where they were trying to start from scratch.
Yeah.
So that doesn't fall in the timeline with any of the others. Yeah. How does all of that work? Because I believe that was the last one they made.
That is the last one they've made so far. There's what happened in the late 80s, early 90s, I believe, was every movie, Friday the 13th, part 1 through 8, was made by Paramount. And it started to kind of go downhill, and New Line approached Paramount, who owned Freddy Krueger, and they were like, hey, let us buy the rights to this, and we'll take Jason and like all this stuff, and then we'll make Friday the 13th movies. And they're like, all right, sweet. But they never sold them the Friday the 13th name, which is why every movie that came out after 8, which is Jason Goes to Hell, Jason X, Freddy vs. Jason, didn't have the Friday the 13th name in it. Because it was New Line movies and they didn't have the rights to that name.
But it continued
the same story.
Off.
Right.
So tell me about those movies, because I haven't seen them. Like, what happened? Why are we in Manhattan? Why are we in hell? Like, what's Jason X?
Jason catches a cruise liner that's leaving Camp Crystal Lake in part 8, and that takes him to Manhattan.
Okay.
So they leave from a cruise from... God, it's so stupid. They leave. He somehow, if they're not, I don't remember if they're docking from Crystal Lake. I'm pretty sure they're not. But if they're not docking from Crystal Lake, Jason definitely swam from Crystal Lake to wherever they were docking at.
Okay.
And then got aboard the cruise liner. So it's a cruise liner going to Manhattan. And apparently there was a lot of production turmoil because they had written the last like 45, like half of the movie was supposed to be in New York, in Manhattan, and there was all these cool set pieces and like all this kind of stuff. Like Jason was gonna go to the Twin Towers and like kill somebody on top of the Twin Towers or something like that. And basically the producers were like, "No, are you serious? No, you're making this movie for a dime and a handshake. You need to rewrite that right now." And so the dude went, "Well, we've got the cruise set built, so in the movie called Jason Takes Manhattan." About 15 minutes takes place in Manhattan.
Okay.
And then they never really explain between 8 and 9. This girl has psychic ability somewhat. She's connected to Jason because Jason almost killed her at Camp Crystal Lake when she was a kid. So they have some kind of like psychic connection. She keeps seeing Jason as a child and stuff like this, like weird stuff like that. And then basically she is like remembering him drowning as a child or something like that at the end of the movie, and it makes him start drowning, and then like a big sewer rush comes in and sweeps him away, and then they're like, okay, cool, he's dead, we did it, guys. And then in 9 he's just back in Crystal Lake as like regular Jason.
Gotcha. So Manhattan is what, technically 8 then?
8.
Okay. And then which one is 9?
Jason Goes to Hell, in which they also kill Jason at the very beginning of the movie. And that's where they talk more about like the curse and like the Necronomicon type stuff, because it's like Jason is a curse set upon Crystal Lake, and so he becomes this little like worm looking thing, and basically his body gets taken to the coroner and his heart starts beating enough for the coroner to eat his heart. Jason
naturally
inhabits, I mean, why wouldn't you? Obviously, it looks so appetizing. Jason inhabits the coroner's body, and the coroner goes on a killing spree. And so it's basically Jason body jumping person to person until the plot of the movie is he has to be reborn through a Voorhees woman. And there's only 2 left. So he's going after them. The daughter's ex-boyfriend, I think they're exes, finds Jason first and is like trying to protect her. And so he basically fights Jason like the whole movie. Him and this bounty hunter named Creighton Duke fight Jason as different people the whole movie. And then Jason's reborn at the end, and then he gets taken to hell. But the very end of the movie is like his mask, like you see his mask just from where these demons have come out of hell and dragged him to it. And then Freddy Krueger's claw pops up and grabs his mask and drags it under. And you hear Freddy's laugh.
And that's how the Goes to Hell ends.
Right.
And then naturally the next movie is Freddy versus Jason.
You'd think. The next movie is Jason X.
Okay. So take me through Jason X.
Okay. So they were trying to get the rights. There's an entire book on it that I really want to read called Slash of the Titans. And basically since like the late 80s, they were trying to get a Freddy vs. Jason movie up and going. Part 7 was supposed to be Freddy vs. Jason, but they couldn't figure it out in time. So they were like, well, we need him to fight somebody. So they put a girl with telekinetic powers in it. So it was basically Jason versus Carrie. And that was what Part 7 is. And so they were still trying to get the rights worked out. And apparently the producer was like, listen, people are going to forget about Jason. It's not going to be like top of their mind. They're not going to be excited anymore. We need a movie to come out right now that'll keep Jason in their minds. And so some guy went in there and pitched Jason Goes to Space. And even the beginning is set in like present day, but it's 2008. So that still is, and the movie came out in 2002. So they still gave themselves a little bit of padding because they were like, okay, Freddy vs. Jason will have happened before this. So technically Freddy vs. Jason happens and then Jason X, but the way it comes out is Jason X Freddy vs. Jason.
Gotcha.
So yeah, he goes to space. He gets cryogenically frozen in 2008, wakes up in like 3008, goes to space, kills a bunch of people, gets a sick ass upgrade. He gets like his body blown in half and then falls onto these nanobites that heal you. And since all of him is broken, it basically makes him like a metallic, really cool. It's called like Uber Jason.
Nice.
And so he gets upgraded like that. And then he falls back down to Earth. Eventually, after the ship and stuff blows up, he falls back down to Earth. And, or Earth 2, as they call it. And you see kids that are like at a lake and they went, what is that? I think it was a meteorite. Let's go check it out. And then that's basically, chronologically, the last we ever see of Jason. He's in 3008 about to kill some people at a lake. Half robot.
So they go pretty off the rails with some of these.
Oh, yeah. They
Now,
go real off the rails.
And then Freddy versus Jason. Are we gonna do Nightmare on Elm Street next week, or are we going to do just regular horror movies next week? What are you thinking for the Halloween special of the Scruffy Movies podcast?
I'm thinking maybe just horror movies, so I don't know. But we definitely got to do a Nightmare on Elm Street one at some point.
Well, if we want to do that, then we might want to save it until I can get actually caught up and maybe put that one in my pile for that.
Okay.
Because if not, I really want to ask you how in the world that ends up.
Well, I've seen what some of the other scripts were. Unused scripts for Freddy vs. Jason. The plot they came up with was actually pretty smart. It ties into the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise because if people aren't scared of Freddy anymore, then he can't exist. He gets his powers from people's fear.
Right.
And people have forgotten about him on Elm Street, so he searches the bowels of hell to find somebody to try and make them remember who he is, and he finds Jason. So he resurrects Jason, pretends to be his mother in Jason's dream, makes him go to Elm Street, start killing all these people, and everybody's like, oh my god, Freddy's back, he's killing all these people, but it's Jason. And then eventually they get scared enough, Freddy can rise back to power, and so he's like, okay, Jason, you're done to me, I have my power back, I'm about to kill everyone, but Jason is like, well, I'm killing people too, so no, and then that's what makes them fight.
Gotcha. Okay, so it's to bring the fear back, really.
Right. But it's good. It's actually pretty good. It was one of the first ones I remember watching, and I had my hand. I watched it on my PlayStation 2, and I had my hand on the power button the whole time on my controller, getting ready to turn it off. I was just like, okay, I've seen enough. I've watched 20 minutes of it, and I was like, that's enough. I've seen it enough. I can't take any more.
I thought you were going to say in case it got too scary and you had to cut it off.
Yeah, if it got too scary, I used to hate horror movies. Hate them.
You know, going back and rewatching all of these, and because I definitely watch probably a lot more older movies than most people do, so I'm sort of used to seeing what you expect in those movies in movies that old, I guess is the best way to say it. Mm-hmm. But going back and sort of rewatching all of these reminded me how unscary movies were back then.
Oh yeah, not one bit.
Like not at all.
That scary.
When I did get to the 2009 version of Friday the 13th, I was like, this is more what we're accustomed to seeing.
Yeah.
Where, I mean, they do some things that are maybe not typical of Jason, at least up until that point. Like where he made the boyfriend watch his girlfriend burned alive and, you know, things of that nature. But it wasn't even that I'm talking about. It was just shot and directed and produced more like a scary movie that we sort of expect now.
Right.
Instead of just a guy running through the woods that's not really that scary. Just like the Halloween movies aren't really that scary when you go back and watch them now. Like, you don't have to worry about watching them with the lights off.
Yeah, which is so funny because now an entire new subgenre of horror movies has come out, and people are calling it postmodern horror, where it fits the basis of it's not scary anymore just to see a bunch of random strangers set up that you don't care about and then have a guy come through and go,
right,
and stab them all. It's not scary. Nobody's scared of that anymore. So now there's like this entire new genre of basically the way it was explained that I saw was if you took the horror element out of it, it would still be an interesting story. So it's like a family drama, like in Hereditary, a new movie that just came out. It's like a family drama. And you would watch a 2-hour family drama of like all their problems, all their issues. They have a lot to solve. But also someone gets possessed.
Right.
And so it's basically all this stuff where the movie would be interesting without the horror element. And then once the horror element is introduced, you're like, oh no, I liked all these people. Oh no. And it makes you like think, and it's shot differently and all this stuff. So that's funny that you say that because literally an entirely new subgenre has been birthed from that exact thought.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's so true, I feel like. And in the original ones, and in all of really the movies from the 1980s, but especially the Friday the 13th, it really all comes down to one big jump scare at the end.
Yeah.
The one big jump scare at the end is sort of what I guess in those days made you walk out of the movie theater and go, ooh, that got us there. Like it was worth that. It was worth that one jump. The entire movie was worth that one jump.
Well, they probably were jumping a lot more just throughout the movie than we are because we could see it coming from a mile away.
Yeah.
We're like, oh yeah, we're used to this, whatever. We become so desensitized to it. We're like, yep, here he comes. 3, 2, there he is.
And you can truthfully like nail on the head.
Yeah.
If you pick up one of these movies, not having seen it in a decade, you know when every kill is coming.
Yeah. My friend who doesn't like scary movies, he went to go see part 3 with us, and even he, having never seen a Friday the 13th movie before, he hates scary movies, like refuses to watch them. I was like, are you going to be cool? And he's like, dude, it's Friday the 13th 3. I'm cool. And I was like, well, and that just says it all right there. A guy who hates scary movies is like, yeah, dude, I'm not going to be scared of this.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Totally. They're great. But I could totally see how that genre sort of birthed itself. Because I think traditionally, that would have been more of just like what you call a thriller. Even though thrillers don't necessarily need to have the horror element by any means, there was a genre of thrillers that sort of sprinkled that on there to sort of sprinkle it on and spruce things up a little bit. Mm-hmm. And I guess they're really just sort of doubling down on that. What are some good examples of these postmodern horrors?
The new It movie is a good one because it's a really good coming of age story, but then also they fight a killer clown.
Okay.
It Follows is a really good one because it's like this girl is going through all her trials and tribulations at high school. She's like growing up, she's going to college, whatever. But then also a STD monster's coming after her.
Yeah, that's the Haunting by STD movie.
Yeah, right. So A Quiet Place is another family drama. They have a deaf daughter. All this stuff is happening to them just in real life. But then also aliens that hunt by sound come to Earth. So there's like all these postmodern movies where if you just lifted the horror element out of it, they would still be really captivating, compelling movies. And it's almost so much of a setup, really. Usually what these movies do is give you like one good scare in the beginning, and that's supposed to hold you over for like 30 to 45 minutes of them. I mean, there'll be like little things, like little like, oh, it's like tension, but there's nothing big like, bah, oh my God. For like a good 30 or 45 minutes, you're just getting to know the characters. And then usually the last 30 minutes is just like unbearable horror. It's just terrible, terrible things are happening.
Gotcha.
And so that's usually like the formula for it now.
Because I understand more hearing that. Because in my mind, I'm thinking the only movie I can remember where it was like, oh, this is a normal movie, until surprise horror movie was the one with the family vacation that's going to Mexico and they end up at the vampire
bar. I knew you were going to say From Dusk Till Dawn.
Yes,
I knew
From Dusk Till Dawn. That's it. That is the quintessential, like, we're watching a regular movie. Surprise! No, you're not.
Here's George Clooney and Quentin Tarantino. They just robbed a bank. Now they're taking you to Mexico.
Yep.
I mean, and that basically, it would be a good family drama with them. It would be interesting to see how the Gecko brothers made it out of the bank robbery. Like, there was 2 interesting movies going at once that converged into a horror movie.
Into a vampire flick.
Yeah, leave it to Quentin Tarantino to write a movie that's like 20 years before its time.
So he wrote that.
He wrote it, and then Robert Rodriguez directed it. Quentin Tarantino was also going to direct it, but he was like, I need to focus on my acting. Because he plays one of the Gecko brothers in the movie.
Right.
And so he's like, I can't direct and act. I have to just do one or the other. So he got his close friend Robert Rodriguez to direct it.
I feel like he's in a lot of movies, and at no point ever have I been like, oh, he needs to work on his acting, or even that I expect him to be a decent actor. Like, when I see him in a movie acting, usually in his movies, it's such a treat that I'm just like, ooh. Like, I could care less if you're a horrible actor or not. To see you like assume a role is actually kind of cool.
Well, that's so funny because I had the thought of when I first watched From Dusk Till Dawn, I was like, oh, he's gonna take me totally out of the movie. Seeing Quentin Tarantino act, because he's not an actor; he's a writer and a director. And then when he started acting, I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Like, it's not. Yeah. It was like, all right, cool.
And that's sort of the attitude I see. Like, if someone's a horrible actor, they're a horrible actor. And if you stick out like a sore thumb, then you stick out. But I think I'm not quite as sensitive to bad acting as you are, for sure. Because you're definitely more of a connoisseur of the arts. Whereas I'm more of, like, if you get me to go along with it, you've done your job. You've won. Yeah. I'm going along with it. And if you totally take me out of it and I can't just get on board with you, then at that point, it's really bad. Because if I can't get on board with you, and I've watched some horrible movies and been like, yeah, I thought Rubber was, it made a good statement. And everybody else is like, oh, that was the worst movie ever made.
Yeah, I hate Rubber.
Yeah, so I don't know. I think I'm a little bit less in tune and a little bit less inclined to nitpick when something like that happens. Especially, like I said, when it's the man himself and you get to see him in one of his own movies. Yeah. You're just so excited.
Well, I mean, and I'm not even... I try and watch every movie, I think because I'm such a connoisseur of movies, knowing how much hard work went into this. Nobody sets out to make a bad movie. Everybody sets out to make the best movie they ever made. The best movie you've ever seen in your life.
Right.
That's what they want their movie to be. So nobody ever intentionally tries to make a bad movie. And I try and take that into account when I watch some bad movies.
Right.
But you got to think, like, on set and everybody's talking and they're like, wow, this is going to be really cool. This is going to be a really good movie. And then it comes out and people are like, well, this is terrible. And people are laughing at it in the theater. I felt so bad. I went to it was a horror movie convention, the same one I just recently went to, but it was last year, called Splatterflix. And we watched a movie called The Mutilator, which is a super old 80s movie. And it has, like, cheesy effects. Bad acting from specifically one dude was terrible. He's like, Becky, where are you going? I should come with you. I mean, he's terrible. But they got the writer and director of the movie, the special effects guy, and 2 of the actors to come watch the screening with us. And so we're sitting there watching it, enjoying it, and then people would like start dying, and everybody would just start laughing. And I just went, oh no. You gotta know the dude who wrote and directed that movie. When he was shooting that scene, I was like, wow, this is gonna scare so many people. This is gonna be so cool. And even the special effects guy, when he's like stabbing them, people are laughing. So the both of them have to be like, why did we agree to do this?
But I would imagine that at this point, though, they would have been sort of on a circuit of going to these previews, and they understand that in the past few decades, sort of the reaction most people have when they watch those movies. So I'm sure they saw it coming. In fact, if it's known for having bad acting and known for being that bad, and they're still traveling around showing it off because of that, I would say at that point they're almost kind of expecting it.
Well, I mean, and I know that probably the actors are like, I did what I could do. At the end of the day, it wasn't their movie, but just like the director has to be like, because he knows like, oh, I could have done this differently to make it scarier. There's a really good movie. Have you ever seen Troll 2?
If I have, it's been years and years.
It's one of the worst movies ever made. Like, terrible. They go to a town called Nilbog, which is goblin spelled backwards. In a movie called Troll 2, they're attacked by goblins, not trolls. The trolls only want to attack them to make them into plants so that they can eat them, because all the goblins are vegetarian in the movie. Yeah, weird. It's one of the worst movies ever made. But there was a really good documentary that came out about it called Best Worst Movie. And it's basically all the actors now and like the cult following Troll 2 has, and it like follows them around to conventions and stuff. And basically all the actors, you see them really enjoying it. They're like, hey guys, this scene was particularly crazy. I didn't think I made a good acting decision in this scene. So the actors really like it. And then they got the guy who co-wrote it and directed it to come out and see a screening, and he got mad that people were laughing at it. He's like, that's not funny. And was just like getting mad. He got up and left like halfway through the movie because he was so mad.
Was this an original screening or some event many years later?
It was an event like many years later where people where the movie is known for being one of the worst movies of all time. So people are like, it has a cult following where people love it for being so bad.
That's his own fault for getting his panties in a wad.
I know, and that also happened with Tommy Wiseau in The Room. He tried to make a serious like drama movie, and everyone laughed at it so much that when it came out, he was like, "Oh no, I made it a black comedy. This is totally a black comedy." And everybody's like, "No, it's not." I don't know if I believe you. I think you tried to make a drama.
Yeah. Either way, I'm glad we've come light years since the 1980s when it comes to making scary movies.
Yeah, that was a long conversation about the scariness versus non-scariness of scary movies in the 80s.
Yeah, for real. But going back and watching some of the old ones, like, that's what makes them so awesome. And that, I think that sort of adds to the rewatchability. Like, with a lot of the movies now, once the secret's given away, once the twist has happened, you're not as inclined to go back and rewatch that movie over and over again. But with these OG slashers, like it just is what it is. It just has its pace and it goes from beginning to end. And yeah, you may know ultimately what's going to happen, but it's more like cruise control than it is like, oh, you've spoiled that, or oh, I now know the spoiler, so it's literally not even worth sitting here going back through another 2-hour movie. I
think a good majority of those movies, especially like Friday the 13th, Halloween, Nightmare on Elm Street, they're not scary to us anymore, but they're just fun. Like, it's fun to watch those movies. It's fun to be like, oh, he killed some dude with a weed whacker, dude, sweet. Right. Like, it's just fun to watch them now. So they've transitioned well, I think, into modern popular culture where people still really embrace it, and they're just fun movies to watch, even though they don't. It's something that, like, you go to a Halloween party, pop in on the background.
Exactly.
And everybody kind of half watches it and is like, oh, cool, Jason. And then keeps talking and, like, doing whatever.
And you can come in at any point of any movie of, I guess, the 1980s ones and sort of know what's going on.
Yeah, you're like, oh, did the guy with the weird haircut, did he get got? And they're like, oh, dude, he got 10 minutes ago. And you're like, oh, man. So it's not anything even like where you have to sit down and watch. Like, you have to pay attention to these movies.
Yeah.
To know what's going on. It's just like, you could go to the bathroom here for about 30 minutes. You can come back and we'll be good.
And the kills, I will say the kills in Friday the 13th are way more varied than in Halloween. He doesn't really have like his go-to weapon, I don't guess, as much. He sort of uses whatever's around him. I think an axe, machete, those get used a lot.
Yeah, he's always synonymous with the machete, but if you really watch the movies, it's just whatever is around him.
It really is.
Me joking around just now and saying, "Oh man, he killed a dude with a weed whacker." He actually does that.
Oh yeah.
He rips a dude's face off with a weed whacker.
It's, Michael Myers will, if given the opportunity, like grab a butcher knife.
Yeah.
But even with Jason, if given the opportunity to hold on to the same machete he just used 10 minutes ago, or grab the axe that's right next to him, he'll grab the axe. Or I think my favorite was a broadhead from like a bow and arrow. And you didn't even see the bow or the arrow beforehand. It was just like he just randomly manifested a broadhead that you would go kill a deer with and killed somebody with it. And then in one of them, I can't remember, it might have been the 2009 version, he actually nails somebody with an arrow from like a long way away. They were out on the boat. Had to have been the 2009 version.
Oh, yes, 2009.
They were out on the boat, and he just nails them from the shore right in her eyeball. And I was like, well, that's definitely something you didn't see in the originals.
Yeah.
The bear traps and whatnot.
Yeah. And that Jason, I think, is still like alive in that movie, which you can tell by, I've always seen people make the joke of, you can tell what movies Jason is alive in because he runs in them. Once he becomes undead, it's like the slow, like the Jason that you know.
Zombie Jason.
Right.
Yeah.
Because he's undead.
What did you think about the 2009 version? What are your thoughts? We haven't really thrown that into any of the chronological conversation or anything we've had so far.
Okay, so when that movie came out in 2008, I was not allowed to go see it yet. But I was obsessed with the Friday the 13th movies. I was like, I'm going to see this. My parents don't like horror movies, so I knew neither one of them would take me. It came out Friday, February 13th, I remember, because I saw it on Valentine's Day the next day with my friend. We went together, and we bought tickets 20 minutes late to Confessions of a Shopaholic.
To slip into an R-rated movie.
To slip into Friday the 13th. And she kept, like, screaming loud. It would pop out, and she would go, ah! And I remember I kept whispering to her. I was like, shut your mouth. You're going to get us kicked out. Shut up. Shut up. I was like, if you get us kicked out, I'm going to be so mad.
Adults don't scream during movies.
Yeah, I was so excited to see it. And I was like, if you get us kicked out, I'm going to lose it. So eventually, using my knowledge of the Friday the 13th franchise, we came up with a code where if I thought something was going to pop up, I would squeeze her knee. So she would go like, and cover her eyes so it wouldn't pop up and scare her. And then credit to that movie, I called probably about 70% of the scares. There was a good 30% where I was just sitting there and they were just talking and everything was cool. And then just like a machete would pop up out of the ground. And I was like, oh no, I'm sorry. And I started squeezing her leg and make her scream more. So that, I mean, I like the reboot of Friday the 13th. I think it's really funny, actually. Yeah. Whenever that dude, Trent, whenever he's in the cop car at the end calling for the police and Jason throws a body out onto the cop car and he goes, ah! Like a girl started screaming, I lost it. I thought it was hilarious. And I like that they kind of stuck to their guns because even at the end with Jared Padalecki, his sister, and that girl he'd been talking to the whole time, they were all running away from Jason. And I was like, they've kind of set both of these girls up to be the final girl. But I guess maybe they'll both be the final girl. And then of course she's like crawling into the hole or something, and Jason stabs her. And I went, oh, okay, cool. They are sticking to the final girl thing.
Yeah.
So I mean that movie, I think, was clearly made by people who they enjoyed the humor elements, like the fun elements of watching a Friday the 13th movie. Maybe a little too much. They put the humor in. Because at the end of the day, it's still a scary movie.
Yeah.
But the humor did creep in a lot. And, like, I don't mind horror comedies as long as the comedy is separate from the horror. But then if you have, like, a funny scene going on inside and then you cut out to show Jason watching them, it's kind of like, oh.
Right.
All right. Like, you can't be fully invested in the comedy or the horror.
Yeah, and I think they tried to sort of fast forward what we were talking about earlier, where getting to who we think of as Jason took 3 movies in the beginning, and you sort of see the progression through the bag on the face to the hockey mask and everything. You know, in that movie, it all really kind of happens very quickly. But then there were some parts of it where I was like, oh, he kidnaps people now and like keeps them chained in a cave or in a mine.
Didn't like that.
I didn't necessarily like that either, because again, it was sort of like, and I'm going to say it again, that kill in the very beginning with the first group of people, where he traps one of them down and forces him to watch his girlfriend burn. Like, that didn't feel like the same Jason. That felt like a maybe a very awesome, scary person to be in any other horror movie, but it wasn't the slasher for slasher's sake. That was like premeditated. Yeah. Like, I want you to actually feel, not die. And that sort of just, I didn't know if maybe the other movies had developed into that and I just missed it.
No, the other movies even kind of underdevelop, where in the second movie the girl is able to like put on his mom's sweater and convince him that she's his mom and stuff, you know, and like kind of trick him. The other movies are basically like Jason is an unrelenting killing machine. If he sees you, you're dead. Yeah. Which is why he's my favorite. No rules apply to him. In Halloween, Michael goes after his family. If you're in the way of him killing his family, he will kill you. In Nightmare on Elm Street, Freddy can only go after kids on Elm Street or associated in their dreams. Can only do that. But Jason is cryogenically frozen for 1,000 years. Gets unfrozen, wakes up in space, and is like, freezes a lady's face, breaks it in half on the table, finds his machete, and is like, all right, and just starts killing people on a spaceship. Like, it's not, he has no rules. There's no limitations to what you can do to Jason. He's just an unrelenting killing machine. He's like a shark. He's like the shark in Jaws.
Yeah. And you know, one thing that always bugs me about these old movies, and this is true for every early slasher, is that nobody sees any blood or any remnants of anything. Jason can kill someone in the living room, and you're in the kitchen one doorway away, and then you walk straight through, and yeah, it may have shown like a quick clip of a shoe dropping where he was dragging the body, but there should be a giant pool of blood there, or there should be, you know, screams and thumps and all of that. That's really the only thing that when I watch these movies, and there's in Halloween, there's a scene where someone gets stabbed to the wall, and then 4 minutes later, someone walks through where that just happened and sees nothing. You know, yeah. Like, you just kind of got to give him a little bit.
Like the dude was walking on his hands in part 3, and Jason chops him in between half. The legs in half. Yes, and then it's just like, all right, and picks him up and puts him on the banister, and his girlfriend's like, hey, all right, and then just like sits down, and then the blood starts dripping, and she's like, oh my god, yes. Like, has no idea that any of this was going down. And also, can I say, Jason was hiding under a hammock, and she didn't see him through the latticed hammock. Come on.
Yes. And that is actually a callback to the arrow kill I was talking about, where he reaches up from under the bed and pushes it through. And I think he might have used an arrow in that one too. I can't remember.
Yeah, he killed Kevin Bacon in the first movie.
Yes, it was Kevin Bacon with an arrow.
That was Kevin Bacon.
Kevin Bacon, totally. So when I was watching that first movie, they're sort of introducing the counselors, and everyone kind of gets their entrance. And then all of a sudden, Kevin Bacon's here. He's in the party. Yeah. He's hanging out. And there was like no intro, no nothing. He's one of the very first ones to get killed. And I know this was really one of his, I don't know if you would call it a breakout role, but it was definitely a first role. Yeah. And if it would have been made 5 years later, he would have been the big name in the movie, and they would have had a massive entrance and a massive exit. Yeah. But like understated throwaway actor Kevin Bacon was pretty cool to see. Yeah,
and it's really cool because reading that book, there's a couple of big actors that have been in these movies. Kevin Bacon being one. Corey Feldman was huge in the 80s. And then Crispin Glover, who you would know played George McFly in Back to the Future.
Oh, yeah.
Is in the fourth movie.
Okay.
And there was so many... It goes movie by movie, and it like interviews the actors and like tells the story of the movie through what the actors are telling the interviewer. And it was like all these people who went on to do nothing and was like, oh, Friday the 13th was so beneath me, but I needed a paycheck. I couldn't believe I was doing this. Like all this stuff about how they hated it. They were like, they wanted to be drama actors at the theater and all this stuff. And then the 3 people that I can pick out off the top of my head right now Kevin Bacon, Crispin Glover, and Corey Feldman, and when they were giving their interviews, were like, yeah, dude, that was awesome being on set. I love being in that movie. If they asked me to come back and do it tomorrow, I would. Like, all three of them. Huge actors, A-list actors that people would know. Well, not really A-list anymore, but people know who they are.
Right.
They went on to do really cool things in their careers. All loved it. And then there was like the dude who played the Tommy Chong type character in part 3 was like, I couldn't believe it. They were making me smoke weed while some man ran around with a hockey mask. Ridiculous. Like, it was just like, come on, dude.
Yeah, a little bit of humility goes a long way.
Yeah, come on. And it kind of is like, I could see maybe why you weren't in anything else.
Yeah, no kidding. So, in the second one, I think it was, where half of the people go to the bar.
Yeah.
Whatever happened to those people?
We started this conversation.
We did start this conversation. I wanted to definitely touch on it before we let off here. What happened to those people? What was that story?
There was a guy, the guy with the red hair. I believe he came back to the camp, or he was like driving back to the camp and then was killed by Jason. Something like that. But they just didn't have time in the movie for it. Like, it kind of took away from the camp that we were at right now, and everyone was dying at this camp. So they cut it out of the movie. So now it just seems like this really important guy who they've introduced. He's been with the main characters all this time. He goes to the bar with them, and then he's like, I'm going to stay for after hours.
We know he got really drunk. Like, they played that up.
He's just cool. He's just hanging out at the bar.
So he survived because he found the only spot in town that was an after hours bar.
Yeah, he survived because he didn't have time. They didn't have time in the movie to go back to him. So that dude's just still. But imagine him like coming back the next morning, kind of hungover, and he's like, "Oh no,
stumbling across everything,
everybody's bodies, and he's like, "Man, I'm glad I stayed for after hours."
That would make like a good hangover style movie of like you show up with not being there the night before, but seeing all the remnants of what happened and then trying to piece it all back together.
That would actually be a pretty funny movie. That'd be a pretty good movie.
That would be a good
horror comedy.
Yeah. One of the satirical horror movies.
So he's basically one of the only ones to survive because his character got left on the cutting room floor.
All right. So one thing I do want to hit on is, actually, I'm going to put you on the spot here because last week was Halloween, or the week before. You just went and saw the newest Halloween movie.
I did.
So, what are your thoughts? Give us the breakdown. Don't spoil it because it's still in theaters, and I haven't seen it.
It literally just came out. It was good. I had a few issues with it. Some things that kind of where we were talking about the reboot of Friday the 13th a minute ago, where you were like, oh, it's a really good, scary movie, but it doesn't feel like a Friday the 13th. I would say 80% of this movie feels like a Halloween movie, but there's probably about 20% where I was just kind of like, all right, come on, this isn't Halloween. But it was really good. I enjoyed it. I would probably give it about a 7 out of 10.
Okay. That's not bad.
No. I still prefer H2O's continuity to the new continuity. But yeah, I mean, it's a good movie. I would suggest going to see it. It's interesting. It's cool to see Michael Myers back on the big screen. It's cool to hear the Halloween music back on the big screen again. But yeah, I just had a few issues with it that I'm sure we'll talk about in a later podcast when you're able to catch it.
Yep. And everybody has.
Yeah. But yeah, it was good. Just a few things.
Did they make Laurie out to be a complete and total badass like it showed in the trailers?
Yes, but that was kind of something that irritated me.
Okay. Enough said.
Yeah.
I can see that.
And that's nothing to say about her character. Jamie Lee Curtis plays it great. And I have nothing wrong with like those type of roles or anything like that. But when you get somebody who is not scared of Michael and literally the last however long is focused on Michael and her.
Like 40 years.
Right, and she's not scared of him. It's kind of like, oh, it makes you not scared of him. There's no stakes. So there's stakes for everybody else.
Yeah.
But then when they start focusing on that relationship, there's kind of no stakes to it because she's not scared. So you're like, oh, well, she's going to beat him. She's not scared. And even subconsciously, it makes you, it's like the thing of having, like, you know that your dad's sleeping somewhere in the house. So, I mean, even as an adult, you're like, my dad's here. Right. It's just that thing you have where you're like, my dad's not scared, so I don't have to be.
Yeah.
So it was that thing. It was the exact same thing. She wasn't scared, so I didn't have to be.
Because even in H2O, it was like, it wasn't a twist, but it was sort of a surprise, and it definitely sort of cool to see when she like closed the gate behind her and
right,
you know, and she stood up, and that was sort of her standing up for the first time.
Right, and I was actually talking to my friend about it, and I was like, in H2O, she was prepped for Michael to a point, but she was still scared.
Right.
She was scared to go back in there, but she's like, I have to do this. Whereas this one, and this isn't spoiling anything because it's in the trailer, she's like, I've prayed for him to get out because I want to kill him.
Right.
So when she becomes the person that Michael's going after in the movie, it's just like, oh, well, she's not scared. I'm not scared. And so that kind of irked me a little bit.
Makes sense. Well, I'm definitely still going to go see it. And potentially, if we can do that this week, then we might cover it a little bit more in depth next week. But I know it's still...
Yeah, in our horror movie breakdown.
That's right. All the horror movies. It's just going to be a horror-oriented episode. Obviously, for Halloween, it'll be coming out the week of Halloween, the next one.
And it's literally just going to be whatever horror movies we want to talk about.
Yeah, for real. I'm probably just going to go to like the highest-rated horror movies of all time and just start going down all the ones I've never seen.
Yeah.
I don't know. I might do that, and then I might do like just Google the best worst horror movies of all time just to get some chuckles.
You gotta watch Troll 2.
Okay, I can do that.
You gotta watch. Oh man, it's bad.
I can do that.
Oh, it's bad, but it's really funny. Have you ever seen the "Oh my God" meme?
Yeah,
that's from that movie.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, but in that movie, it's played legitimately. He's watching someone die, and he goes, "Oh my God." But it's played for like legitimate scares in that movie.
Well, is there anything else that we haven't talked about with Friday the 13th?
No, I think I love Friday the 13th. You've got to definitely watch them, and we got to do it like a follow-up podcast where after you've seen all of them, and you can come in with all your knowledge now. But no, I think we've covered everything that we can cover. I really want to talk to you about Tommy Jarvis because I love that character. And so once you're able to see 4, 5, and 6, we gotta gab about Jarvis.
Okay, we can do that. We can absolutely do that. And now I know to be on the lookout for his character as well.
He's the main character.
Okay.
Fair enough. He's the main character in every movie he's in. Only person to fight Jason more than once and survive. Really cool story. All right, well, thank you guys for listening to the Scruffy Movies podcast. Next week, like we said, we're coming back with a horror movie episode for you guys. It's going to be a lot of fun. Make sure to like and comment and subscribe if you like this video. Be sure and follow us on Instagram at ScruffyMovies and
Crockalicious.
I can't not laugh at it. So thank you for joining us. We'll see you all next week.
Bye.